Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Bryan here with you again. Glad you can join me today on this beautiful Friday. If you don't know, it's May 21st right now. This is a very special edition of the podcast we got today. We have a great edition of the GSMC Football Podcast. On this beautiful Friday, we're going to talk a lot about the drama that is happening within the NFL and the drama that's happening within sports. You know, now, this weekend, it's a great time to be a sports fan. Now, I know that during this pandemic and during these uncertain times, it's been very difficult for some people, but sports in general have really helped us through and through thick and through thin, and it is a great time to be a sports fan. We got so many things to do. We don't know what to watch. This is one of the best times of year to be a sports fan. We honestly don't know what to watch. I don't know what to watch. There's so many things happening and so many big events. We got NHL playoffs happening. We got the PGA Championship, if you're into golf. That's going on all this weekend. We also got the NBA playoffs start team. We also have MLB ramping up. There are so many great events and great sporting events to watch this weekend. I wish I could watch them all. I really do. But I can't, and it's so hard. As a sports fan, what do you do tonight? What do you do tonight? Now, one of the biggest things that as sports fan we try to do is we try to keep up with all of our favorite teams. But what happens when all of your favorite teams are playing tonight? That is one of the biggest conflicts that you as a sports fan and we as sports fans, we deal with. We can't watch every single game at every single time. It's crazy. For example, I'm on the Bay Area. I'm in the West Coast. How am I going to watch the Giants and the Warriors play tonight? The Giants are playing the Dodgers. That's a huge rivalry. It's one of the biggest rivalries in sports. And I got the play-in game. I got Steph versus Ja Morant. I got playoff basketball happening tonight as well. So it's like, how do I choose? And we also got NHL playoffs happening, which is great. And honestly, this is one of the best times to be a sports fan. And I know that's crazy being a football podcast and not having any football to watch, but is this one of the best times of year to be a sports fan? Just ask yourself that. You have so many sports coming around. You have football getting underway. You got mini camps. You got rookies in new places. You got veterans showing up. Now, I thought when it comes to mini camp, I thought veterans would not be participating. But you have teams in this league. You have rookies in this league learning from the veterans in mini camp. Participation in mini camp is the numbers, if you look at them, I'm seeing 85% to 95% league-wide. That's crazy to me. It's crazy to me that these veterans are putting their differences to a side with the NFL Players Union and with the NFL in general and being able to say, you know what? We want to work on our craft. Now, some of those players, some of those veterans have contractual obligations. Some of those players won't get paid or get a bonus if they come to minicamp in shape and ready to go. And honestly, get your money. If you're those players, I respect you for doing that. Get your money. But if you're one of those players who wants to hold out, I don't hold you to it. I really don't. Because you have to get yours. The thing about the NFL that is so different, which is crazy to me, is that the guaranteed contracts are not there. You look at baseball, they have guaranteed money. They have guaranteed contracts. You look at all these other NBA and all these other sports. NFL doesn't have Major League Baseball guaranteed contract money. The NFL, they are so demanding when it comes to the players. The NFL football is such a physically demanding sport. You would think with the violence they endure on a day in, on a weekly basis, you would think they would make their contracts guaranteed. But no. That is not the case. And honestly, it blows my mind. But like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot to get into with the sports world. We have a lot to talk about, not only in the sports world as a whole, but in the football world as a whole too. There's more drama to the Tim Tebow news. There's more trade talk. There's more drama in the NFL with big names going to big places and moving cities. And there's also some drama when it comes to the unwritten rules. We're going to talk about everything. We're going to talk about Tim Tebow and what his effect on the Jacksonville Jaguars means for the league. We're going to talk about the unwritten rules in sports. And we're also going to talk about how the NFL is controlling their players and how sometimes it's not as what they should do and how sometimes it's unfair for the NFL to treat their players with disrespect. We're going to get all into that coming up. It's the GSMC Football Podcast. Bryan Iglesias here with you again. Glad you can be here on this beautiful Friday morning. It's May 21st. We're getting back to normal. So let's get into it, shall we? Okay, we're talking about how this time of year is one of the greatest time of years for a sports fan. Now, you may be thinking, okay, why? Why is it? Well, it's great because we got so many sports going on in the world right now. Now, I know this is a football podcast. I know you come here to talk about football, but you know what? Football is not always on right now. There's an offseason football. The games aren't physically being played. Now, just like you, I miss those games tremendously. And just like you, I'm such a football fanatic. I love everything about football. But you know what? There's other sports out there. There's other sports that are bringing high drama. Like I said, we got the NHL playoffs coming. We got the PGA Tour coming. The championship is on its way right now this weekend. We got the NBA playoffs happening this weekend. There's so much to look forward to. We got Major League Baseball ramping up. There's so many great rivalries within Major League Baseball. We got one great rivalry of the Giants and the Dodgers playing this weekend. The two best teams in the National League. They might be the two best teams in Major League Baseball. They are the two best teams. We got a lot of high drama. And there, you know what? For me as a fan, and I know a lot of you go through this, we don't know what to watch. It's like today I feel like a kid in the candy store. You remember when you went to like Walgreens or the candy store or the grocery store with your mom and you were told, okay, you can only pick so many. You have $5. Here you go. Pick whatever you want. And you had choices. It's always nice to have choices, but you know what? It's a good problem to have. It's a problem to have, but it's a good one because you have to delegate your time. You have to manage what you're going to watch, and sometimes you get too overwhelmed. I'm in the candy store with my mom, and I'm thinking, I don't know what to get. Do I want a Snickers? Do I want a Hershey's bar? Do I want a Milky Way? Do I want some Milk Duds? Do I want Bunch of Crunch? I don't know. I'm like a kid in the candy store right now. I hope you can tell from my enthusiasm and my voice that I'm ready. I'm going to be my mind is going to be blown, and I need to find out a way how to watch all these games because just like you, I'm a fan of football. Don't get me wrong. I'm a football fanatic. But I'm also a fan of basketball, baseball, and hockey. I love all these other sports. And it's going to be so difficult to watch. It's going to be so difficult to keep up with all these sports going on right now. It's crazy to me. Like, I'm the type of guy who's going to watch, like, multiple sports on multiple screens. I know I've been getting a lot of grief because my girlfriend tells me, why are you not paying attention to one game? You have two screens in front of you. You have a phone screen with the Giants game on. You have something about the NFL draft on your computer. And you have the NBA playoffs on in the background. How do you concentrate? And I just tell them, you know what? I go from screen to screen to screen. That's how dedicated I am to watching sports. And I know a lot of you guys who are listening are dedicated to watching sports as well. Now, we can't always watch football. Football's not always on, but we talk about one of the greatest times to be a sports fan. May is a great time. Another great time is also October. You got baseball playoffs. You got the heart of the NFL season coming around. And also, summertime is a great time because you got the basketball playoffs, baseball is underway, you got the dog days of summer, and you got NFL slowly but surely with the preseason coming up. So, you have to ask yourself, as a football fan and as a sports fan, what is the most exciting time for you, month-wise, as a sports fan in general? Now, you could say, oh, football, NFL playoffs, Super Bowl time. Yeah, we love that. But let's go deeper. Instead of just talking all about football, let's go deeper into all of the sports area, all of professional sports. What is the best, most exciting month to be a sports fan? Some people may say May. Say right now you got baseball coming up. Some people say October. Now, that's probably my favorite because I was on October, baby. But having baseball playoffs, having the NFL being scheduled and being able to go full blast, and just having the ability to watch sports is so great right now because there's so many sports out there to choose from. You have your pick of the litter. Now, that's a good problem to have, like I mentioned before. You know what else is a good problem to have? Having the ability to come back and do something after a long period of time and try a new position. Now, I know everybody has been talking about this story in the NFL. The Jacksonville Jaguars finally reached an agreement with Tim Tebow to play tight end. And you know what? The NFL and media and everyone's going crazy. Everybody has a topic of discussion about this, and everybody has an opinion. You want to know what my opinion is? Listen back to the previous podcasts, and you'll know my opinion. But just to tell you, I think that Tim Tebow is getting an unfair advantage. I just look at the facts. You have to look at the facts of this guy hasn't played in a professional football game in the NFL since the 2012 season. Let me rephrase that. The 2012 season is the last game he's played. Think about that. Just think about that. He hasn't played professional football in 10 years. 10 years. I don't know about you, but when I haven't done something in 10 years and I try to change to something new, I'm going to be a little rusty. I don't know if this is a ploy, if this is a decoy to get all the attention off of Trevor Lawrence. I don't know if Urban Meyer's a genius or if he's flat out nuts. But it's so difficult. And I don't think this is going to work. I'm the type of person who, I want to give him a chance. I want to say, you know what? He's a athlete. His body is in his peak condition, but he's 37 years old. Is it really in peak condition? But I want to give him a chance. I want to give everybody a chance because I'm an optimistic guy. And I know you are too. We have to give him a chance, but we can still be critical of the move. We can still be critical because there are so many other free agents out there that they could have had a tight end not named Tim Tebow. And there are so many other people out there that they could have had. But they chose to get this guy because I think networking is a huge deal when it comes to Tim Tebow and Jaguars and his connection with Urban Meyer at Florida and the two the two national championships he won in 2009 and 2006 and the Heisman Trophy he won. Yeah, he was a great college player, but sometimes college players don't always pan out in the NFL. For example, Andre Ward, like I mentioned in previous podcasts before, he was a great Heisman Trophy winner. He was a quarterback. He went to the Detroit Lions. He only played 4 seasons. Now, if you're great in college, you're not going to be great always in the NFL. It's just a matter of fact. We've seen so many busts. We've seen so many people in this NFL, in this league. We've seen so many people become buffs. You see Ryan Leaf. You see Jamarcus Russell. These guys were high top guys, high drafted picks who had fantastic college careers. And they didn't last in the NFL because the game was just too tough for them. Now you can ask, okay, they had fantastic college careers, but why didn't they work in the NFL? For example, they didn't work in the NFL because the league has guys who are bigger, who are faster, who are stronger, and who are smarter than guys in college. Guys in college they're not grown men yet. Some of them have families, but when you get to the NFL, when you get to the league, when you play from going to a Division I school, who's like a lower top tier division, to playing in packed arenas every single day, every single Sunday, you're going to have trouble because you're not going to be able to do the things you did in college in the NFL. It's not going to happen because guys are bigger, they're faster, and they're stronger. I compare college athletes, kind of young adults. NFL athletes, they're grown men. When you are a grown man and you have to be able to provide for your family, and the only way you're going to be able to provide for your family is actually going out, doing your job, you're going to learn all the little nitty and gritty tricks in the book, and you're not going to let some young punk you right out of college. You're going to get schooled if you're a rookie. That's why I'm thinking these guys who are drafted right now, I'm thinking the guys like Zach Wilson, the guys like Justin Fields, the guys like Trevor Lawrence, who are going to play right away on bad teams, on teams who don't have the roster, on teams who don't have the talent around him. They're not going to be successful. They're not going to be successful for the near present. They might be successful in the future when they learn, when they develop. But if they're thrown into the fire, they're not going to be successful just because they don't have the roster around them and just because they're kids. These guys are 19, 20, and 21-year-old kids. They're not adults yet. They may say they're adults, they may act mature, but they're not. When you have somebody who's 35 years old and who has 2 kids and who has to provide childcare and has to pay the rent every single day, guys are going to bust their butts and guys are going to try to embarrass other people because they need the money, and that's their lifestyle. Their lifestyle is producing on the field, and if they don't produce, they're not going to be able to pay the bills. It's just like Jalen Hurts said, rent is due every single day. And you know what? I don't plan on missing rent. Now, that's a whole different story. He's competing for a QB battle, but these are grown men these college kids are playing against. So pump the brakes on these guys who are drafted being the saviors. Pump the brakes on that. We don't know what they're going to be like. Because honestly, they're going to get punched in the mouth. And just like Mike Tyson said, everybody's plans change until they get punched in the mouth. These guys are going to have their welcome to the NFL moment. It's going to be interesting, and I'm so excited to see what happens. And I'm so excited to see how these careers are going to develop. It's such an exciting time to be a sports fan right now in 2021. It's so exciting because we're getting back to what we once knew and what we once loved before this whole pandemic started, before we were able to think of the words COVID-19, or before we had to wear masks. We're getting back. Now, I'm fully vaccinated today. That's such an exciting time, and I hope everyone is still just pushing through. I can't wait to get out to the ballpark. I can't wait to get out and to do stuff again without having to wear masks, and I'm just so giddy. It's also really giddy, and it's also an exciting time as a football fan because mini camps are underway, and it's astonishing to me to see that you have mini camps underway and you have the amount of veteran participation within mini camp. It's astonishing because I thought that some of these veterans who aren't contractually obligated, who aren't physically mandatory to go to minicamp, who aren't forced to go to minicamp, who aren't forced to risk their bodies, are supporting their teams. And it's just great to see that the players are coming together during especially times of trouble and times of uncertainty, are coming together as one and being able to help the rookies and being able to help their teams. Now you could say, oh, it's their job. They have to go to minicamp. No. They don't have to go to minicamp. They don't have to. It's just great to see, and it's honestly, it gets me excited for humanity again. It gets me excited to actually go and watch football because we actually get physical football on the field. We actually get to see these players. We get to see these players actually on the field compete with one another during mini camps and during this whole time together. And I'm super excited about it. And I know you are too. You know what's going to be interesting to see? One player I'm super interested to see go and play in minicamp, who I'm kind of skeptical about, is Tim Tebow. And you know what? We're going to talk about him on the other side because there's some big news that happened in the Tim Tebow front. So if you're excited for football season, and if you're excited for minicamp, and you're just excited as a sports fan in general, we got just the thing for you coming up on the other side. We're going to talk Tebow, and we're going to talk how it might be not a great choice for him to make the 53. I don't know if he's going to make the 53. We'll see. Coming up on the other side. Stay tuned.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Hey now, welcome back to the show. Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Bryan here with you again. Happy Friday. Hopefully everyone's doing well. Hopefully everyone's getting ready for this great sports weekend we have. Now, in the previous segment, we talked about the young rookies, and we talked about how the NFL is basically kind of not really doing their players justice. And we also talked about how those NFL players are attending those mini camps, veterans specifically, and how those players are kind of coming together as the NFL and how the product on the field is going to look a lot different when you have NFL players being able to attend minicamp and how they're going to unite together. We also said we're going to get into a lot more of the drama in the NFL. So stick around for that and stick around for how we're going to talk more NFL and more trade deadlines. But first, like I mentioned before, we're going to talk Tim Tebow again. Now, it seems that Tim Tebow throughout the whole offseason, since Ian Rappaport tweeted that the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to give him a shot and Urban Meyer, his former coach, is going to give him a shot. Now, there's been speculation that was just hearsay and, oh, they're not going to give him an actual shot. But there was some big news that was developing. And the big news was that they finally signed him for a contract extension. They finally signed him to a contract. He's actually going to be physically in uniform on the field on minicamp. And we saw pictures. We saw pictures of him on the field. I saw a little video. We saw pictures. I'm not sure if you've seen this. If you haven't seen it, go on social media. Go on Twitter. Go on Facebook. Go on Instagram. Just go online. Go on the GSMC Football Podcast Twitter page, GSMC Football, and try to find it because we'll be posting about it daily. We post daily polls about football. And you know what? One of the polls that we posted is Tim Tebow with this great news with this news of he is going to be back in an NFL uniform on the field, actually doing what he proclaims that he loves, doing what he loves and playing football. Is he actually going to make the roster? Just ponder that. Go to that poll on our Twitter page at GSMC Football and try to think, is he going to actually make a positive impact on the roster, on the Jacksonville Jaguars? Just think about that for a second. In my opinion, I think it might be a little ruse. It might be something to get the weight after their number one quarterback, their number one draft pick this year, Trevor Lawrence. He's going to have a lot of burden on his shoulders. And Tim Tebow's signing is going to affect Trevor Lawrence because he's going to take that pressure that Lawrence feels, being the so-called savior like I talked about in the previous segment. And he's going to take that pressure, and he's going to take all the media pressure, all the fanatic pressure, all the pressure that comes with being the starting quarterback as a rookie in the NFL. He's going to take that pressure, and he's going to tell him how to deal with it, because Tim was in that same situation. And Tim was actually a decent, he produced in the NFL, but statistically, he was one of the worst quarterbacks that I've ever seen. Accuracy-wise, footwork-wise, and just ball placement-wise, he was in the bottom ranks when he was in his prime quarterback back in 2011 and back in 2012. But the interesting thing is he's going to try out for tight end, which really just boggles my mind. It really boggles my mind how he's actually going to play tight end. Now, I look at, is he going to actually want to do the stuff that tight ends usually do? Now, compare him to, I don't know, say a guy named Kyle Pitts, who is the number 4 draft pick in this year's draft, who's supposed to be that new dude. He's going to be that new dude in this league because he is, first of all, he's going to a great offensive system with, if they can have weapons around him, like if they can keep Julio, like we're going to talking down the road, if they can keep him and they can keep the core guys together, watch out. Kyle Pitts is going to be that dude. He might win Rookie of the Year. He might be a dark horse to win Rookie of the Year. But like I said before, is Tim actually going to put up or shut up? I have to look at it like this. Is he actually going to make an effort? Now, you can talk all you want. Yeah, I love the game of football. Yeah, I love those dog days. But when you're in minicamp, you truly know when those pads come on and you're not practicing in shorts anymore. When those pads come on, you truly see who wants it and who doesn't. You'll see that from the first day, from the first snap of the hat. You will see that from the first blow of the whistle. You will see who wants it. And honestly, I'm not sure if Tim Tebow is a guy who wants it, especially at the tight end position. Now, it's crazy to me, a guy who hasn't been in the league for 10 years, who played quarterback last, hasn't played a full-speed game since 2012, is going to try to change positions. A very hard position to play. Some say tight end is one of the most important positions in football. Are you telling me that he's going to compete with guys in the league like Travis Kelce, like George Kittle, like Kyle Pitts, like guys who are even like Zach Ertz? Are you telling me he's going to try to actually play the position like them? Or is this just a ruse? It's mind-boggling to me. It's a head-scratching decision, honestly. And the thing that makes it so head-scratching and so confusing to me is that why now? Why now, when you've been out of the league 10 years, do you want to come back and do you want to change positions? Okay, some people may say, well, he's been out and you just want one last more run at it. He wants to show everybody, you know what, I could do this. I could do any position. I'm Tim Tebow. I'm one of the greatest physical athletes to ever play the NFL and to ever play the game of football. Look at my college career. Look at my career as a football player. I can do this. I'm trying to get past that. I'm trying to get past the negativity that I'm thinking right now. But I always just keep on coming back to, you've been out of the league for 10 years. The game has changed. I don't know if he's going to be able to survive. The only person who knows if he's going to be able to survive is Tim Tebow himself. And honestly, I don't even think he knows what he's going to be doing. I don't know if he's going to be able to want to go into the sleds, to go into the chutes, to actually block a guy when it's almost 110 degrees during Miami and Florida weather in the middle of May, during training camp or during mini camp. And I don't know if he's going to want to be able to do the little things that tight ends do so much. I don't know how his hands are. I don't know how his footwork is. His footwork as a quarterback wasn't great. We all saw it. It wasn't great. And that was one of the things that drove him out of the league. But why now? Why now? Why not when you were in your prime, when you were still in the league? You had a chance at Denver to play tight end. You had a chance at New York to play tight end. And you said, no, I'm a quarterback strictly. I am going to be a quarterback. And if I'm not in this league, I am not going to play another position. And that's fine. He accepted that. And that was his fate. But it just boggles my mind that he's trying to come back. I just don't see it happening. I really don't. I don't see him making the 53. But you know what? Jersey sales say otherwise. He's actually leading the league in Florida in jersey sales. He's leading the league who his jersey, number 85 on the NFL.com shop, is the top selling jersey in the league. Now, you have big-time players. You have guys like Aaron Donald. You have guys like George Kittle, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Tom Brady, who are still in the league. And you have a guy like Tim Tebow leading the league in jersey sales. Now, I don't know about you, but that might be one thing to get Jacksonville to keep him on the roster, to get that quote-unquote publicity that they wanted. Now, if I'm Jacksonville, I shouldn't have to bring in a guy to get publicity. I shouldn't have to bring in a guy who is very well known. He's very likable. Some don't like him. He's a polarizing figure in sports. But my play on the field, it's the NFL, people. It's the National Football League. They don't need a ruse. They don't need somebody to come in and say, hey, we need your help. Just because they're going to sell an extra 1,000 jerseys or just because they're going to sell an extra 1,000 preseason tickets doesn't mean that this guy is going to be liable for his team down the road. I just don't see it. Now, I want to give him a chance, and I'm going to give him a chance, and everybody deserves a chance. But you know what? I just don't see it being feasible for the Jacksonville Jaguars to bring in this guy when there's so many other great tight ends out there on the free agent market, like a Ross Dwelley, who played big minutes for the San Francisco 49ers, like a Jesse James, who was a great piece in the Pittsburgh Steelers. There are so many great tight ends out there. Richard Rodgers, he's out there too. Now, it doesn't make any sense to me. But you know what? Inside Urban Meyer, you got to trust him. If he's actually going to run the ship, and if he's going to run that franchise the way he wants to, then let him. Let him make those decisions. And honestly, this is the time to make those decisions, and this is the time to see, okay, does he really have it? Does he have it? We're going to give you a jersey. We're going to give you some pads. You have to show us. That's the great part about minicamp. That's the great part about training camp. These games don't matter. This is a time where people can do some evaluation. This is a part where people can actually see the physical product on the field. That's what I love about minicamp. That's what I love about training camp. That's what I love about the offseason. This feels like we're actually getting closer to physical games being played because we're actually getting closer to physical football. Like, it's so great to be talking right now and thinking about the actual physical game of football. Thinking about people getting their hands in the dirt, people hitting each other, people running routes, and we actually get to see it. No more speculating of, where is Aaron Rodgers going to go? Or, is the number one draft pick Trevor Lawrence going to be any good? Or how's Trey Lance going to be doing? Or how this person's going to look in this uniform? We actually get to see it, and that's what I'm so excited about. And I know you are too. Now, there's been a lot to talk about within the sports world, especially within the NFL, but now we're going to get into something a little different. we're going to get into the unwritten rules of sports. Now, this is a hot topic, especially in Major League Baseball. This is a hot topic, but it's also a hot topic within a lot of other different sports, like basketball and like football. Like, I don't know if you've seen, but if you're not a baseball fan, you probably don't know, but the Chicago White Sox were playing against the Minnesota Twins, and they were up big. They were up like 9, 10 runs, and I think it was like 10-2, and it was the top of the ninth, and they had a position player up there. They were basically forfeiting the game. And the White Sox, they had a guy up there who's pretty good, who might win Rookie of the Year, and he hit a home run off of a position player, and it barred into the conversation of, okay, was that right? And it barred into the conversation of the unwritten rules in sports. Now, I don't know about you, but when it comes to the unwritten rules in sports, I think it is stupid. I think it's one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. Why have unwritten rules in sports? I don't understand it. Now, I know some unwritten rules are part of the game, and I know some people of the older generation, players from the past, are speaking out about these unwritten rules. But when it comes to unwritten rules, you shouldn't have to abide by them. You should always just play until the game is done. You play to win the game. You play to win the game. And if you have a chance to do something, you should do it. Now, I understand the unwritten rules in the game. I understand that concept. And basically, the unwritten rules are what people say to protect the sanctity of the game and to protect the greatness and the longevity. And some people say, oh, you're not supposed to play the game that way. You know what? Enough with that nonsense. Miss me with that. Because I understand there's a logical, oh, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But you know what? There are unwritten rules that are just ridiculous. There are unwritten rules in sports that are ridiculous. I'm sorry. If it's actually a rule, then put it in the rule book. For example, in the NFL, there's an unwritten rule that, okay, if you're up big in the fourth quarter, no matter what game you're on, it could be the NFC Championship game, it could be a preseason game. If you're up 45-10, you're not throwing the ball, you're running the ball. There's no rule to state you don't have to throw the ball. There's no room to state you can't put your starters in the fourth quarter when you're up big. Now, I know there's the ideology of you don't want to hurt people's feelings. In 2021, we're also feeling conscious. We're also conscious of other people's feelings. And you know what? It made us soft as a society. Basically, unwritten rules are pretty much to make sure that everybody's feelings aren't hurt. It's sports. Sports, some feelings are going to get hurt. It's just a way of life. It's part of sports. You're going to have a winner and you're going to have a loser. You know what? That's what makes sports so great. And honestly, being a loser and being somebody who's getting defeated, it's not that bad. It actually builds character. It actually makes you want to win even more. Now, there's some people who just hate to lose more than they like to win. And people want to have the sanctity of the game protected. People want to be like, no, you can't do that. You don't want to throw the ball deep when you're up 45-10 in the fourth quarter with 5 minutes left. That's disrespectful to the other team. Well, you know what's disrespectful to the other team? Not trying your hardest. Not trying every single down and every single snap to try to beat them. Because there's so much at stake. And these guys are professional athletes. They should know that every single snap counts. It's sports. Competition is what builds sports. What is disrespectful in my mind is them not competing. Them basically saying, we're going to take 3 downs, we're going to kneel 4 times, and we're going to give you the ball. That's disrespectful. That's more disrespectful than being up 45-10 and throwing the ball deep. Because that's showing that A, we respect you and we want to test you guys, instead of B, we're not going to respect you and we don't think you can stop us, so we're going to stop ourselves. That's more disrespectful. And you know what? These unwritten rules are just mind-boggling. And it just grinds my gears. It gets me really fired up when people are saying, oh, you have to respect other people. Well, you know what? Respect is competing in sports. If you're not going to compete, basically, an unwritten rule is, if you take your starters out, you basically are forfeiting the game. You either blew them out or you're getting crushed. That's an unwritten rule that, okay, in a certain amount of time, we're going to take our starters out. Okay, I understand that. But you don't stop competing. If the second string quarterback throws a ball deep and he wants to test the defense that's out there because he doesn't get to play that much, then you know what? By all means, do it. Because you're out there on the field. It's the National Football League. It's professional sports, baby. You get paid to play a child's game. Wouldn't you want to go out there and perform at your best? That is the most respectful thing you could do as an athlete. The most respectful thing you can do as an athlete is compete. And when you're not competing, when you're not doing your job, when you're basically saying we're forfeiting or we don't think you can keep up with us and we know it, we're not going to compete with you anymore, that's disrespectful. People get so emotional and so touchy-feely when they talk about the unwritten rules of sports. Give me a break with that nonsense. Miss me with that nonsense, because professional sports is all about competition and it's entertainment. You're trying to compete with one another. You're playing the best of the best at your sport. You should be able to compete. And you know what? Talking about, oh, we need to preserve everyone's feelings. We can't hurt everybody's feelings anymore. It's a little ridiculous how some of these people who are older generation people, who are boomers, and who are players who have played in the game, it's a little ridiculous to say, that's not good for the game. What, competition isn't good for the game? Are you kidding me? Competition is the best thing for the game. Because competition is the most respectful thing to show somebody. If you want to compete, if you want to go out there and compete on the field, you're basically respecting them as a competitor. That as an athlete, as a former athlete, that would be the most important thing that they're showing me. If they're not showing me any competition, if they're not giving me a way that I can get better and test my skills and be able to compete, that's disrespectful. It's a hot topic issue within the world of sports. It's a hot topic item within any sport. Football, basketball, baseball, soccer, hockey. There's so many of these unwritten rules. And it's a issue that is being discussed, and it's not an issue that's going to go away. We're going to be talking about this 20 to 30 years down the line. And it's a great discussion to have. It really is. Another great discussion is one of the biggest names in the game at the wide receiver position. Is he going to be traded within the next couple of days? I'm hearing rumblings that he might be traded soon. Who's going to be traded and where is he going to go to if he's even going to be traded? There's some big-time trade rumblings in the NFL right now, and we're going to get into more of it and how it is eventually going to impact the NFL and the balance of power in the NFL in a major way this season and for seasons to come. So if you're excited about trade season, if you're excited for the NFL coming up, we got more of it on the other side. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Bryan Iglesias here with you again. Thanks for joining me today. Thanks for joining us. Glad you can be here. It's a Friday. It's a happy Friday edition of the show. Now, in previous segments, we got into a lot regarding all that is the NFL. We got into a lot regarding the draft and how sometimes we need to let people adjust to their new scenarios and their new backgrounds. And we need to let people adjust to their new beginnings. We need to give these draft picks a chance. And also, speaking about giving people chances, we also talked about the Tim Tebow Saga. Now, we went into a lot why Tim Tebow should and should not be in the league. I understand that. This might be the most polarizing figure in sports right now. You either love him or you hate him. And we also got into the unwritten rules of sports. And now some people love him, and now some people hate him. You're either one or the other. It's so black and white, there's no gray in between. There really isn't. And I gave you my thoughts on unwritten rules and how some of them are stupid. But there's a lot to talk about right now, and we're going to get into more of what the NFL is doing during this offseason that is making it one of the craziest offseasons to come in NFL history. And we're also going to get into how this offseason is still going to be super crazy, and there's still some big-time moves going to be made within the NFL that could change the balance of power. So, I'm Bryan Iglesias. Hopefully everyone's doing well. Happy Friday. Hopefully everyone is staying safe out there. And you know what? Let's get straight into it, shall we? But first, before we get into it, little things on Tim Tebow, one last thing. So did you know that Tim Tebow last played an NFL game on December 30th, 2012? Yeah, we all know that. But really interesting fact that I saw from Elias Sports, only 6 players have gone at least 8 years between games played in the NFL. So Tim Tebow could become the 7th. So he could become the 7th player to go at least 8 years between games he played in the NFL. How crazy is that? That's a mind-blowing stat. Now, some of these players you may not know of, but there's one player on here that I think everybody should know. You had the list of Frank Walton. He played 9 years, 311 days prior since games. You had Ross Nagel, 9 years and 8 days. You had David Diaz-Infante, 8 years, 319 days. Tony Adams, 828 years, 291 days. And you had Norm Stadley, 8 years, 240 days. Those were the days between those players' careers where they didn't play a single game in the NFL. There's one player on that list that I didn't mention that everybody should know that might be a good thing for the Tim Tebow crowd. That guy, Doug Flutie. Now, Doug Flutie is, quote-unquote, one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game. He was probably the dual-threat quarterback before dual-threat quarterbacks. Now, he wasn't that tall. He wasn't that big. He didn't have the physical intangibles, but he loved it. And he couldn't get away from it. And if you go look at Doug Flutie highlights when he was with Seattle, oh my God, when he's a quarterback previously of Seattle. He played in like the 80s before Seattle moved to the NFC West. And he was a great quarterback. He was. He's going to go down in one of the greatest of all time. But he played, between games, he had to wait 8 years, 277 days between his last game and when he came back. That's crazy to me. So this just goes to show that it's hard and it's difficult for people, especially in the NFL. I'm talking all pro sports. It's difficult for people to make a comeback because, A, the NFL is a taxing, game. It is physically demanding on your body. You have to be in your peak condition. And then you have to be better than that to survive in the NFL, especially now. Because the last time Tim Tebow played in the NFL in 2012, to when Tim Tebow is going to play right now in 2021, the game has changed. So do you realize Tim Tebow hasn't played a game in the NFL within the last 8 years and 132 days? That was his last NFL game. How crazy is that? I'm just going to let you ponder that. To me, that's crazy. Now, I commend him for going and trying to come back, but it's difficult. It's difficult not only because his body is not in peak condition probably. He is not what he once was when he was in his prime. The man's 33 years old. He's 33, and he wants to play tight end, one of the most difficult positions in football. I just don't see it happening. I'm sorry, I've stated this plenty times. I don't see it happening because A, the game has changed. Now, I'm not saying he can't adapt, but he's used to playing quarterback in the league. Changing positions in football, it's not easy. But changing the positions in the NFL, that's so much more difficult than doing it in college. That's so much more difficult because A, the players are bigger, faster, and stronger. And B, you don't have the experience at that position. You don't have the experience that you had when you played quarterback in the NFL to playing tight end. There's a reason he didn't want to play tight end in the league when he was back in the league when he was in 2012, his last game, when he was with the Jets. He didn't want to play because he had so much egotistic energy built up, and he thought he was God's gift to the earth, and he thought he had a God-given ability to play quarterback, and that's the only thing he did, which honestly, he wasn't a great quarterback to begin with. He was subpar at best. The only reason why people believe Tim Tebow can come back is because they have the good old Christian mentality, and they have that ideology that, oh, he's coming and he stands for good and justice, and that's great. He's one of probably the better guys in the NFL when it comes to being a good citizen. But take all of it out. Take the name Tim Tebow off. If I told you right now that a guy who hasn't played in the league for 8 years and 132 days wants to make a comeback and he wants to change positions, I guarantee you 50% of those people that I talk to, maybe 75% of those people that I talk to, say I'm going to be crazy for trying to attempt it. So take the name out. Take the name Tim Tebow out of it. Just think of a random guy on the street. It's the ideology of this guy coming back. And I know I spent way too much more time than it already has been. But it just boggles my mind that this guy is trying to make a comeback from being out of the league for 8 years and 132 days. That's not easy to do. And it's not going to be easy to do. And you know what? I wouldn't expect him to get cut. I would not be shocked if he didn't get cut within the first 2 cuts. I really wouldn't. But I'm excited to see it because it's a storyline. What else am I excited to see? The way this free agency period and this offseason is going to pan out. Because there's a lot of good players out there, especially in free agency. But there's a lot of good players out there. We're talking top 10 talents in the league out there. And there's a big name who, his name has been floating around for trade rumors ever since the start of the draft. Now, if you haven't heard, Julio Jones has been wanting to be traded. Now, it's crazy to say, one of the best wide receivers in the game, maybe the best wide receiver. He's a top 5 wide receiver. I have to put Julio Jones up there with Odell Beckham Jr., with Tyreek Hill, with DeAndre Hopkins. Those are probably the 4 best wide receivers in the game. And he's up there Okay, I'll put A.J. Brown up there, top 5. But it's uncommon. It is uncommon to have a top 5 wide receiver talent. We're talking, this guy is almost as good, maybe be better than a guy named like Calvin Johnson. It's crazy to see. Calvin Johnson's a Hall of Famer. Now, I wish Calvin Johnson went to a different team because he was whittling away in Detroit. And his career would have been a whole lot. I think he may still be in the league today if he didn't suffer in Detroit. And I hope that Julio Jones doesn't suffer the same fate. Now, some would say, oh, Julio Jones, he's in a bad situation. But he went to the Super Bowl a couple years ago. We all saw that against New England. We all saw the 28-3 lead that they'd blown. And that wasn't his fault. That was Kyle Shanahan's fault. That was Atlanta's. That was Matt Ryan's. They needed to fare better. But at least he got to the Super Bowl. And I'm thinking, this guy's on the trade market? What will you give up for Julio Jones? Because rumor has it, he's out there. And you're going to have to give up a lot. I've heard that his days are numbered by many people in the media. Now, this might be me, but I think that he would be better in a different system with a different coach who's maybe familiar. I don't know. But Julio Jones would be better in a different... Just like I mentioned before, sometimes a change of scenery is good. I always believed a player, if you're not a superstar franchise player, if you're not a player who just loves that city, who won a lot, who won championships, I think everybody should at least try to have a new sense of scenery and a new beginning in their sports career. I think it's pivotal for these athletes to try to experience other places. Now, it might not always work out great. You might be like, okay, the grass is always greener on the other side, right? Wrong, because it is not always the best case. Maybe sometimes you miss what you had and you don't know what you have until you leave. That's a thing with sports. You don't know what you have until it's gone. Now, there's a great article in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution basically breaking down the storyline of the Julio Jones contract situation, and they go through a quick overview of some of the numbers that he puts up. So he had 848 total receptions in 10 seasons. He has 12,896 career receiving yards, 60 touchdown receptions. Since 2018, he leads the league in receiving yards with 1,677. He has the most in the NFL when it comes to receiving yards per game in 2018 with 104.8. He has 61 receptions in 8 postseason games. He's been in 8 postseason games. He has 834 receiving yards in 8 postseason games. That's crazy to me. And it just goes to show that he's putting up eye-popping numbers. He's one of the top 5, maybe even top 3 receivers in the league right now. He may go down in history as a Hall of Famer. But I bet you he's thinking, my time in Atlanta is done. Because a lot of people are saying his time in Atlanta is done too. And it's crazy to think that one of the best wide receivers in the game to ever play the game is on the trading block. Now, this article stated that they don't have to trade Julio Jones. There's different ways you can do this. You could rework Julio Jones to create the room that they need to sign draft picks without any problems. But I just don't think money is the thing. I think he's getting paid well. I think it's a situation. I think he just wants a new change of scenery. We all do sometimes. We all need a new change of scenery. Not to say his career wasn't great in Atlanta. He had a 28-3 lead in the Super Bowl. If it was under his control, he would have won that Super Bowl. He played great in that Super Bowl, and he put up MVP-type numbers as a wide receiver. He's going down as one of the best wide receivers in the game. It just, sometimes you need a new scenery. You need a new change of scenery. Even Jerry Rice, the greatest player of all time in NFL, the greatest wide receiver to ever play the game, considered the greatest player ever. He even changed teams. So if he can do it, Julio can do it. And it just goes to show that this league is so cutthroat that anybody can get traded and anybody can lose their contract. And it's not guaranteed. But it's going to be interesting to see where he ends up. And you know, players in the league are taking note. And some players are even trying to recruit this man. So I'm just thinking, which offense would be more dangerous for Julio in the league? Now, Bleacher Report Gridiron had a great couple of tweets. And they said that two offenses in general would be great for Julio. I'm thinking one, the Titans, the Tennessee Titans, with Ryan Tannehill at quarterback, Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, Josh Reynolds, Anthony Fursker, and you add a superstar in Julio Jones, that might be dangerous. That might be dangerous. Now, another team who would really be dangerous, who's been very active, and media are calling them the darlings of the offseason, is the Arizona Cardinals. Now, just think of this. Just think of this offense. Kyler Murray, James Conner, DeAndre Hopkins, A.J. Green, Randall Moore, and Julio Jones. Wow. Whoa, that would be scary. With Cliff Kingsbury, if he can finally get his offense running correctly and he can finally get his defense to stop an offense in the NFC West, they might be a dark horse this year. Now, if they added Julio Jones, that might be one of the game changers for the National Football League. And that could turn it all on the table. They can turn the league upside down. From a team who hasn't been in the playoffs in a couple years to being one of the favorites to win the Super Bowl. Last time Arizona was great was when Larry Fitzgerald was playing against James Harrison. And I think it was 2008 or something like that. When Kurt Warner was still on the quad. Kurt Warner, the analyst for NFL Network. It's just, that would be crazy to see that kind of firepower in an already stacked NFC West, where you have probably the greatest division in football. The NFC West might be the best division in football. Hands down, it might be. There's so many great players on both sides of the ball, on offense and on defense. There's superstars galore, and teams are stacked. And it's crazy to me that a team that's already stacked right now, that has so much great talent, can get better. And that's the craziness of the National Football League, and that's why we love it. Now, we're just speculating, but Julio Jones would be scary. I don't know. If I was Julio Jones, I would be thinking, do I want DeAndre Hopkins and Adrian Green? Or do I want Calvin Ridley or Kyle Pitts? Both are great options. Both are great options. Two things can be equally true. Those can be both great receiving cores. It's like you're deciding between your favorite candy or your favorite ice cream. Well, do I want chocolate? Do I want Rocky Road? Do I want cookies and cream? Do I want chocolate chip cookie dough? Do I want mint chocolate chip? Do I want Rocky Road? There's so many options for this guy. And it's scary to think about some of the offenses that he could go to. It's crazy to me. What else is crazy is another offense that he could toe to, which I think will be more of a familiarity with him. And it's crazy to me that very little people are talking about it, but it could be true. Now, you're going to have to give up a lot of people and a lot of draft picks. You're going to have to give up a first-round draft pick for Julio. But would it be crazy to deal with him? Would it be crazy to deal with him? There's a team out there in the NFC who would benefit tremendously, who would be scary. And this team, we've seen produce. Now, they didn't produce last year, but they produced in 2019, and it would be scary to see this man on the roster of this team in the NFC. So if you want to find out which team Julio Jones would be the most dangerous on and the most electrifying on, I'm just thinking about the offensive firepower with this team if Julio Jones came to this NFC team. And it's crazy to think. Now, super teams aren't normally formed in the NFL, but this would be a super team. The offensive firepower that would be within this team would be crazy. And I wouldn't be shocked if he came to this team because he had a former coach when he was with Atlanta at this team. He's a very close friend of his, so it could be interesting. But if you want to find out what team this is, stay tuned.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hey now, welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Bryan here with you again. Happy Friday, everyone. I know it's almost the end of the work week. You can push through. You're almost there. We almost got the weekend. Now, wrapping up the last end of this show, we're going to get into some fun things about the NFL and about sports in general. But in previous segments, we talked about the NFL draft. We talked about mini camps opening up, and we're talking actually about players on the field. Not photoshopped pictures of NFL draft picks, not speculation of where people are going to go, where people are going to end up. There's still that speculation, but we physically get players on the field, and I love that. So we can actually talk about football again. We can actually talk about football on the field, and that's just one more step closer to getting back to reality, and I love it. I know a lot of you people love it too, because you turn into this channel and you love football just as much as we do here. I love football, and I know you love football, so let's talk about some football. So, like I mentioned previously, we talked about free agency, we talked about big-time names moving big-time cities, and specifically one player in particular who's in the news within the past couple of weeks, superstar wide receiver for the Atlanta Falcons, Julio Jones. Now, we went over some interesting landing spots that to say if he were to move, if he were to get traded to these teams, those would be some interesting landing spots of Arizona and Tennessee. It's going to be interesting to see where he ends up, if he even goes anywhere. What I always learned, what I always thought to be true, that you can learn a lot in sports from Vegas. From Vegas odds. Now, DKS, DraftKings Sportsbook, they have a very interesting landing odds for Julio Jones's 2021 team. Now, these teams may not be able to get Julio. They may not. But it's always interesting to see who Vegas thinks are going to be able to land this guy. This superstar NFL talent. So, just some of the names and numbers that are on this list for the 2020 team for Julio Jones. You have Tennessee, you have New England, you have Baltimore, you have Los Angeles, you have Indianapolis, and you have Atlanta. Now, DraftKings has Atlanta at minus 150 for Julio Jones's 2021 team. So they think that Julio Jones isn't going anywhere. But there's some interesting teams up here who they think that they could really see going to these teams. For example, Indianapolis. Indianapolis is plus 500 in the second position. Now, they're the closest underdog to land him. That's interesting because they got a new quarterback in Carson Wentz, and you put Julio Jones with Carson Wentz and T.Y. Hilton, two of the better veterans in the league when it comes to wide receivers, two of the most explosive receivers in the league when it comes to wide receivers, deep ball threats. They both can take the top off the defense. That could be scary. Another team up there who I honestly hope that Julio doesn't go to is the Baltimore Ravens at plus 700. Now, until the Baltimore Ravens actually get a quarterback who can actually throw the ball to their receivers, let's be honest, I love Lamar Jackson as a quarterback. He's a young, great, dual-threat quarterback, but he doesn't have the arm accuracy. He doesn't have the ball placement skills that Julio would basically need. Julio would be whittling away like Calvin Johnson whittled away in Detroit. It would not be a great match because you have a quarterback who can't get your receivers the ball. We've seen that with Hollywood Brown. We've seen that with Bryan. We've seen basically his two top receivers when they went to the playoffs a couple years ago, when they were leading the AFC, were tight ends. Now, I'm not saying a quarterback doesn't love his tight ends because the tight ends is a scared blanket for the quarterback, but when you can't get the ball to your best player, a wide receiver who needs the ball, who thrives with the ball in his hands, then you're just going to whittle away. You're basically going to be a blocker. Now, an interesting duo that I could see happening would be in New England. They had a big free agents offseason. They added a lot. They added tight ends. They added many veterans on the free agency. But they don't have a true number one there. They don't have a true number one in New England. You put Julio Jones with Cam Newton. Now, I'm not saying Cam Newton is more accurate and a better quarterback than Lamar Jackson is right now, but he has the ability to get the ball to Julio because he would just force feed him. Because he's not running the read option like Lamar is. He actually has the accuracy where he can get it to Julio. And it would be interesting to see Julio and Cam with Bill Belichick. I mean, Tom Brady was great, but if Tom Brady had Julio, it would have been a wrap. He would have stayed. But like I mentioned before, like I teased before the break, I mentioned one team in the NFC that would be just crazy to see him on. Now, like I mentioned before, one team in the NFC has his former offensive coordinator that he went to the Super Bowl with, that he was up 20-3 with on that team. He's the head coach. Now, many people forget Kyle Shanahan, the coach of the San Francisco 49ers, was the offensive coordinator when they went to the Super Bowl, when they lost, when they had a 28-3 lead against New England Patriots back in 2015, 2016. I'm just saying, how crazy would that be? You have, just think of this roster. You have George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Tebow Samuel. You have Richie James Jr., who's a decent, good number 3. People would kill to have him as a number 3 wide receiver. Then you would have running backs, Jeff Wilson Jr. You had Raheem Mostert, the guy who scored 4 touchdowns in the NFC Championship game, with a great offensive line being led by Alex Mack, who formerly played with him in Atlanta, and Trent Williams, with Kyle Shanahan, one of the best young minds in the NFL when it comes to play calling and offensive design. And you have a guy who they just drafted in Trey Lance. Now, I know Jimmy Garoppolo's still there, and I would love to see what he does because he's been a hot button issue with many people in the national media. They think that Trey Lance is going to come in, but let's slow the roll on quarterbacks who just got drafted now these days being the savior. Let's slow the roll. Let's give him some time to develop. But I still think Jimmy Garoppolo is still a decent enough quarterback. I mean, when the dude was healthy, he only played, a full season? And when he played a full season, he led his team to the freaking Super Bowl. Now, some stuff is beyond his control. He was basically a pass away from the Super Bowl, a Emmanuel Sanders catch away from the Super Bowl title, away from the Super Bowl MVP, and away from a Lombardi trophy. Now, I'm not saying that San Francisco is going to be their destination, but just how crazy would that be? They're at plus 800 now at DKS, at the DraftKings Sportsbook. But how crazy of an offensive firepower attack would that be? Now, there's some great defenses in the NFC. Tampa Bay would be one of them. You got Seattle always up there. The Rams have a great defense. But it would be great to see Jalen Ramsey for the Los Angeles Rams going against Julio Jones for the San Francisco 49ers and battling each other one-on-one twice, maybe 3 times a year, maybe even in playoffs. How awesome would that be? It's great to think about what would happen, and it's great to speculate how all these moves would make and how these people would change teams. But let's get down to what would it cost? Because for a superstar player like that, it's going to cost a ton. Many people are thinking, oh, no, it's only going to cost 1 first-round pick. No. If I'm Atlanta and I'm giving up my franchise player, my franchise talent, the one people pay big money to see, the one people come to Atlanta Falcon games for, I'm not giving him up for 1 first-round pick. You have to be crazy to think you're giving up for just 1 first-round pick. I'm taking everything you have and then some. I'm at least getting 3 first-round picks. I'm getting 2 seconds. I'm getting 5 picks for a franchise talent. If you're going to trade the best wide receiver in the game right now, you need to get something for him. And I'm not just talking about picks. I'm talking about players too. Because if you're going to trade your best player for nothing, for a bag of chips and a soda, your fan base is going to revolt. People in Atlanta are going to go crazy. People all over the world would go crazy who are football fans. Don't be like the Houston Texans, Atlanta. Don't be like them. Don't trade your best player for a washed-up running back and a bag of chips and some soda. Just don't. Just say no. If you're going to trade for Julio Jones, you're going to be giving up a lot. A lot of teams are going to be giving up a lot just to get this guy in the building. Speaking of giving up a lot, it's recruiting season for the NFL. That means players on different teams are recruiting them. Players at their position are recruiting them. It's crazy to see. If you don't have social media, go check this out. So A.J. Brown in April potentially talked about trading for Julio Jones for Tennessee. Now, he said something really interesting. He said, I would give up number 11 if this happens. Playing along my idol would be crazy. No team would be stopping that. A.J. Brown and Julio Jones on one side, would that be one of the best wide receiver duos to ever play, to ever be part of the game? Now, giving up a lot. You're going to give up a lot. You might give up King Henry. You might give up your star linebackers. You might give up your first-round picks for the next 5 years. But to get this guy in the building, you give up anything. Because right now, we are in a life, we are in a sports world where, what have you done for me lately? And you need to win now. That window would open. It would open for Tennessee, and it would open dramatically for anybody who got this guy. Like I mentioned before, there are other players out there who are recruiting Julio Jones to come and play for their team. Another guy, a superstar wide receiver, just like A.J. Brown, DeAndre Hopkins. He also recruited him by social media too. A lot of players are recruiting other players on social media. And it's cool to see. It's great to see. It's one of the things I love about social media is that, social media can be so toxic sometimes, but it can also be great because it's a great way to connect with other people. And it's also awesome to see like these superstars connecting with one another on social media. So, for example, like I said before, DeAndre Hopkins started recruiting Julio Jones, two of the best, if not the top 2 wide receivers in the league right now. DeAndre Hopkins tweeted out, "Somebody at the gym asked me, would I reconstruct my contract for Julio Jones?" And you know what he gave? He gave a gif of Neil Patrick Harris giving a thumbs up. 2 thumbs up. Now just think about that. If you thought A.J. Brown and if you thought Julio Jones would be a great wide receiver duo, this might be the greatest wide receiver duo of all time in NFL history. You had the number 1 wide receiver and the number 2 wide receiver lined up on the same field in the same offense with a young dual threat quarterback who needs to learn how to be more accurate, but you give me any of those 2 receivers, I'm sorry. If you're not scoring 45 points a game, if you're not putting up big-time receiver numbers, then you're doing something wrong. But how crazy would that be? Now, like I said, number 1 and number 2, you decipher who's the better wide receiver. I'm not going to get into that game, but it's crazy to see. And that's one of the reasons I love about the NFL. Because it seems like the NFL never stops. Even when games aren't being played. Even when the draft isn't happening. Even when the schedule release is done. We're still talking about this. And it's great. It seems like the NFL just never sleeps. And I wish more sports would do this. I wish more sports would be like the NFL and be more of an entertainment aspect. Like I think baseball, Major League Baseball needs to take notes from the NFL. Because the NFL is doing it right when it comes to getting the younger demographic and getting everybody hooked on, oh, I need the NFL. They always leave us wanting more. They always have that anticipation factor. Whether it's in free agency, whether it's even in the game, whether it's with his schedule release. Now, there's been a lot of people bashing the NFL over the past couple of years that they don't love their players, that they couldn't care less about their players or their players' safety. But they're doing something great when it comes to a marketing aspect. Because every time I look on social media, every time I turn on ESPN, every time I turn on the NFL Network, every time I turn on the radio for listening to sports radio, every time I turn on a sports podcast, there always seems to be electricity around the NFL. And they're always, whether they're playing in games, whether they're doing the schedule release, whether they're doing the draft, whether it's just free agent frenzy, there always seems to be an electric atmosphere and a vibe around the NFL that leaves us as fans wanting more. And more leagues should be doing that. I think basketball is heading up the rear with that. They are trying to keep up with the NFL, but no one can keep up with the NFL because the NFL is king. And this truly shows why. It truly shows why the NFL is king, because we are craving every little ounce we can get. Another great story from the NFL that actually happened not only a couple days ago. Well, I'm not sure if you saw this, but 4 players in the NFL from different teams, they challenged one another in a 40-yard dash. So the 4 players were Mecole Hardman Jr., Henry Ruggs III, you had Justin Jefferson from the Minnesota Vikings, 3 wide receivers, and 1 linebacker, Devin White from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And it was just cool to see that they all were competing with one another, but they're training. And people ate this story up. So what happened was they all ran 40 times, and whoever had the fastest one won. Okay? So now you're thinking 3 wide receivers and 1 linebacker. Of course the linebacker's going to lose, right? He's going to get smoked, right? Not necessarily. Now, they all ran, and Mecole Hardman ran a 4.22. Henry Ruggs ran a 4.26. Justin Jefferson, he ran a 4.5. But the most interesting thing and the most impressive thing I saw was that Devin White Jr., he ran a 4.37. He's a linebacker. He's a linebacker for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he ran a 4.37. That's crazy. Now, you would expect wide receivers to move in 4.2s and 4.3s. But a linebacker? When I saw this story, I was I couldn't believe it. I watched the video and I was stunned, just like many of you. This dude's a linebacker. He ran a 4.37 40 time. Some linebackers don't even finish with 5.0 40 times. He ran a 4.37. That's moving. The last time I saw a linebacker run that well would be Patrick Willis. He's the fastest linebacker I ever saw. Now, he had breakaway speed. He's a Hall of Famer, none doubt. But a linebacker who's 240 pounds running 4.37. Now, I wish I had that God-given ability when I played football. Oh, man. A 4.37. That's crazy. That is crazy to me. No linebacker in the NFL should run a 4.37. DBs run 4.37s. Wide receivers run 4.37s. Linebacker? No, that's ridiculous. I'm sorry. Oh man, I would not want to get hit by that guy. But it just shows that the league is changing. Back then, you didn't used to have linebackers running 4.4s, 4.5s. This guy ran a 4.37, and he's 240 pounds. That's crazy. That is literally one of the craziest things of the offseason, and people are talking about it. I've seen it talking on radio shows all across the country. I've seen it talked about on NFL Network, and it's crazy to me that these guys are making such a big deal out of it when they're just running a 40 time, and when they're not even playing games. That's how big the NFL is. That's how dominant, and that's how powerful the NFL is. The NFL is king of sports. You know that. We all know that. That's why we love it, though. And the NFL knows it, too. Just with this story, we can't get enough. We need more NFL. And this is just a great story. And it honestly makes me want the NFL to start even sooner. I can't wait. And I know you can't wait. It's such a great time to be a sports fan. And I just wish the NFL and football would come back in our lives. Well, that's all the time I got for today. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for joining us on the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. But before I go, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to our channels, subscribe to our multimedia platforms and our social media platforms. We have a bunch of channels up there, from music to food to sports. And just leave a nice review on this channel. It really helps us out. And don't forget to follow us on our social media platforms like Facebook, like Twitter. And follow us at GSMC Football on Twitter. We post daily, and we really appreciate it. We have some really great content up there. I hope you enjoyed what you heard. I hope you learned something. I'm Bryan Iglesia. Glad to be with you. Hope everyone enjoys their weekend. Be well, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you on the other side.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.